Guy this year?
Welcome back to BBN After Dark. Robbie Floyd joined by Brandon Burnstill and Andrew Engelken making his BBN After Dark debut. Bernie, the biggest storyline for me for the weekend, it's not the first weekend Harrison Bloebaum has played, but it is the weekend that he has finally arrived, Bernie, here in 2026. A monster weekend for Harrison Bloebaum. If you were worried that it was going to be a slow start for him, worry no more. He's already got 5 doubles and 2 home runs on the season already, and he's just getting started. Bernie, Harrison back in full swing. Give me your thoughts on Harrison Bloebaum, his first weekend really dominating here in 2026.
Yeah, I think the first weekend for Harrison, I think he went like 1 for 5, walked a lot. His quality of the bats were pretty good. His timing was just a little bit off. He was late on a lot of fastballs, and that's that was really the big difference of the weekend. Is his timing was back, and when Harrison's on time, the quality of the bats. He's going to give you a great one every time. So if he's on time with the ball, he's going to send some balls flying, which clearly he did this past weekend.
Pringle, we've been talking about the biggest weakness for this Burnstill team being the depth of that lineup. How important is it to not just have Harrison Bloebaum back in the lineup, but for him to come back and immediately be producing at this high of a level? You've got back to that, you could say two-headed monster of Rudy and Harrison, but really it's been a three-headed monster with Kenny Douglas in there as well. Andrew, how important is it to have Harrison Bloebaum playing at this high of a level for this Burnstill lineup?
When you have 2 guys of Rudy, I guess you could say 3 guys if you include Kenny, 3 really awesome hitters at the top of that lineup. You can even throw Owen Lewis in there. It just makes the lineup a lot deeper. A lot of strengths in this lineup, and I would like to shout out Rowan and Apple. Both had great weekends, both one-dotting.
Yeah, Bernie, and I was going to mention a guy who had a really nice weekend. I know you've kind of been rotating through different guys in the 5-hole, a guy who had a great weekend, and I think, at least at the end of the weekend, I think he found his way into the 5-hole. That was Jacob Applehans. Bernie, this is a guy I think we all believe in the long term, but in the short term, Bernie, what's been the difference when he's had these great weekends versus when he's struggled a little bit? What does it mean for Apple to succeed? What does he need to do to really be a full-time player in that 5 or 6 hole?
Yeah, I think for Apple, a lot of it is just his approach to the plate. Going up there to do damage. Apple has a tendency to not want to embarrass himself, not to strike out, even when we talk about swinging at fastballs or swinging at curveballs, there's many times the past couple weekends that he's got himself out like on a first pitch curveball, and that's just not our pitch. That's not what we're looking for up there. Just learning going up there, learning how to take the off speed, hit the fastballs. You don't have to get the first strike necessarily if it's a curveball. And go up there and do damage. And he found his way there the second game of the weekend, and then finished off the weekend there because in the first game, his first at bat in the 5-hole in the second game of the weekend, he had a bases clearing double at 1 hop to left field fence. And from that point on, he wasn't going to move out of the spot for at least that weekend.
Pringle, something that's going to be a storyline for us all season long. It's the home run chase, the chase for 30 homers for Rudy Montenegro Langley. Put up 3 more this weekend. He's already the MVP of March and April. He's definitely the favorite to be the MVP of the spring-summer season. But 3 more home runs for Rudy. Andrew, what's it going to take? We know what this guy's capable of, but 30 home runs is unheard of in the youth baseball level. Obviously, he's got the long schedule this year, playing the youth schedule in the spring, and then the high school schedule in the fall, so he's got a long schedule, a lot of games to do it. What's it going to take for Rudy to actually reach that goal of 30 home runs?
I think the key is going to accumulate as many home runs as early as possible before he gets to that drop 3. And Rudy is strong enough to hit those homers with those drop 3, but the fences go back, a lot of different changes there.
Bernie, we've talked a lot about Rudy's offense, but the pitching and defense, Bernie, has also been on I don't know if you could say his defense has been on another level than it's been in the past. He's always been a great defender, but the pitching at least feels like it's taken into another level. Bernie, 6 Ks this weekend for Rudy, which isn't necessarily crazy, but 0 walks in 4 innings. This is a guy who, Bernie, he used to be a guy who, he may strike out 6 guys in 4 innings, but it's going to come with 5 walks. Now he's just pumping strikes. This weekend he did it with multiple pitches. What's it been, Bernie? We talk about the offense. What's it been the pitching and defense for Rudy this season to really be that all-around player?
Yeah, early in the year, down some arms, Rudy proved that he could pitch in big games. So he had a couple starts, a couple championship games, and we all know Rudy throws hard. There's no doubt about that. I think the big, unlocking of Rudy was just having an all-speed pitch that he could at least show. He could show he could throw a curveball or his cutter slider just around the zone. I think he had a couple of championship game starts where he pitched well. There was no doubt about that. But teams were able to just kind of sit fastball on him, and that's how they were able to kind of put some runs on him, a couple here and there. But this start this weekend, man. Again, off-speed wasn't electric, but his cutter was good enough to be around the zone where that team had to think about it. When you start thinking about Rudy's cutter, you're going to get blown away by the fastball every single time. He had a perfect game through 3 for giving up, I think, 2 hits in the last inning, but still finished with no earned runs. And then, behind the plate, I think he's caught, I'm looking right now, he's caught 52 innings this season with only 21 guys stealing. He's been amazing back there, and, really shout out the whole catching staff between Kenny and Lewis back there. Those two combined have caught 18 innings, and only 4 guys total have stolen off them. So I think, as a team, we've done an amazing job at controlling the base pass this year.
Yeah, it's been very, very impressive to watch Rudy do his thing. But again, Bernie, if Rudy's going to pitch more, other guys got to catch as well. And I thought, like you said, Kenny Douglas, I was impressed by how well he caught Rudy this past weekend. Pringle, a big weekend for Burnsville, but a big weekend all around from the varsity teams. 9-3 combined for the varsity teams. If you add in 10U Bell, 12-4 from the varsity teams, a very successful weekend. And I want to talk about 12U Floyd, who this team came out a little bit slow to start the season, especially offensively, but really turned it around this weekend. A lot of guys had big-time weekends, but 2 guys I want to mention, Pringle, off the bat. Tyler Grotha, a monster weekend. We talked about him in the opening weekend of the season being a big surprise, but he's kept things going. A big-time 1850 OPS from this weekend. And Clay Lede, he's kind of on the other side where he came out a little bit slow, but a big-time hitter in the fall and really showed big-time numbers this weekend as well. 2 doubles from him to go with a couple RBIs. Big-time weekend for Tyler Grotha and Clay Lede. What did you see from those 2 hitters, Pringle, and just the 12U offense in general?
For Clay especially, we all knew this was coming eventually. He was taking good at-bats to start the year, man. He was just missing them, keep pulling his head a little bit. We knew it was going to all come to Clay. And, with Tyler Grotha, everything he does is right. He's a professional hitter. He swings at fastballs, takes off speed. And another guy I want to shout out, Jake Schilling, who had a nice weekend, got the call and produced immediately coming up.
Yeah, all 3 of those guys, big-time weekends. The biggest thing for Tyler, he's always been a guy with very good bat-to-ball skills, but the power wasn't necessarily what you want it to be, especially from a guy his size. The biggest thing he needed to do was start pulling the ball in the air, and I don't know if you guys saw on video his triple he hit this weekend. It was an absolute bomb, pulled down the right field line. It was a stand-up triple, just a monster shot for Tyler Grotha. If he can pull the ball, especially in the air, we were on a big field this weekend, Bernie. He's going to hit several home runs this season if he does that. Those were some of the surprises, Bernie, but a couple of guys that probably aren't surprising. Camden Kramer, a big-time weekend. Benny Wanner, an OPS over 1350. And Wade Kiefer had a nice weekend as well. Bernie, what are your thoughts on the 12U offense really feeling like it came through this weekend?
Yeah, I just, come on those 3 players there. I think, 12U could still be searching for that guy to really set the lineup. Be the Rudy or Harrison or, vote of a lineup that, kind of anchors that lineup. And, I think we all expected Benny Wanner. It still could be Benny Wanner. But, so far this year, it looks like it's been, Kraft and Kramer for the most part. And there's a lot of different guys on that team that could do it.
And Pringle, moving on to the pitching staff, I want to talk about specifically the guys that threw Sunday. The starter was Camden Kraft, 6 Ks, 1 walk for him. The reliever was Clay Lede, 3 Ks, 1 walk for him. That's 9 Ks and 2 walks from what's really been the strength of this team, Pringle, has been the pitching staff. These 2 guys in particular have probably been the 2 most impressive pitchers, at least from the strikeout to walk department. Give me your thoughts on the 12U pitching staff, Pringle, especially Camden Kraft and Clay Lede.
The thing with Kraft, man, is he throws really hard. He has two very good off-speed pitches. And, this was just one of those days where everything just went together perfectly. He's got all the talent in the world, and Clay was awesome, man. He's going to pump strikes. He's got a great curveball. And, this going down this pitching staff, it's very deep. I mean, if Benny's your 3rd best pitcher, Benny's a great pitcher. It just shows the depth of this pitching staff.
Let's move on to 13U Floyd, a 2-1 weekend for them, a very nice weekend from this team, now 12-4 on the season. They've been great. You know, there may be questions about this team going into the year. They've certainly answered all those, especially offensively. But, Bernie, one guy who's going to be really excited to see Rudy move to high school ball is Cooper Woolen, because it feels like Cooper has put up MVP numbers a lot of different months, but he's always passed up for Rudy Montenegro Langley. He's doing it right now, Bernie, a big-time weekend on the mound, 7 Ks. To 0 walks, and at the plate, a 667 batting average, 1,400 OPS for the weekend. Cooper Woolen, Bernie, has just been a monster this season. Big time weekend. Give me your thoughts on Cooper Woolen. Obviously, I think he's an underdog to win the MVP in the spring summer, but what do you think about his chances to potentially be the fall MVP of the youth?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at that award, if you're looking at the look ahead lines here, I think Cooper Woolen has to be the favorite for it. This guy is going to be if he's not first this year because of Rudy or Harrison, he's top 3 for sure. Worst case scenario I think for him. So, if that's your floor, being third right now behind those 2 guys, you're definitely going to be the front runner for the fall. And it's Cooper's award to lose in the fall.
Another guy, there's 2 guys on this team, Pringle, with an over 1,400 OPS. Cooper Woolen, who I think everybody expected, and Hamilton Case is the other guy that maybe some people expected. It was definitely very good in the fall, but this is a guy who's still playing above his age level, and he's doing absolutely monster things at the plate. Pringle, give me your thoughts on Hamilton Case, off to a fantastic start to the year.
I would say that the biggest difference between last year and this year with Hamilton is his strength. He's been working out at the cave every week, 2 times a week at the minimum, and the power just really gone there. Hamilton was always going to put the ball in play, line drives. Now he's hitting balls, and he's hitting them hard. He hit a homer that's a legit bomb in any baseball field.
Bernie, this pitching staff, I think Rob talked about this being the biggest question mark for this team. I don't remember what we said about this team going into the year, Bernie, but I think we mentioned the pitching staff maybe being the biggest question mark. They have a 71-31 strikeout to walk rate, and they've got 4 guys, Bernie, with more than twice the amount or more of strikeouts to walks. Wheaton Hainline, Carson Griffith, Cooper Woolen, and Owen Haynes, all with double their strikeouts to walks, or in Owen Haynes' case, almost 5-1 strikeouts to walks. Bernie, this pitching staff, a question mark going into the year. They've been a strength so far this season. Give me your thoughts on the 13U Floyd pitching staff.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I said about this pitching staff, preseason, but this staff was always going to be anchored by Owen Haynes and Wheaton Hainline. If those are your top 2 guys, the lefties in the top rotation, you're not going to have a bad rotation ever. But now it's been nice to see Cooper Woolen, who I think most of the Bears guys thought would take the next step on the mound with just the amount of talent he has. He's 100% stepped up. And then the guy who spent a lot of the last fall catching, that's came into a role of pitching these usually game 2 Sunday scenarios, usually semifinal championship type games. It's been absolutely electric. It's Carson Griffith. I've talked about him on a couple past shows already, man. But if I'm pointing out one guy who stands out, who made this rotation what it is, you kind of have to point at Carson Griffith, as being the next guy.
Another team with a winning weekend was 11U Nickerson. They are 11-3 on the season. Another team, Pringle, that we had question marks about going into the year, especially the depth of the lineup. You knew you had Blake. You knew you had Peter Rojek. You knew you had guys like Wyatt Geldmacher. But who else was going to fill out this lineup? For this team offensively, Camden Kinsey has an OPS over 1,400, and Easton Taylor, a guy who's been a star in the past, needed to show up this year, and he has so far. They've both been big-time stars. Give me your thoughts on the 11U Nickerson offense, Pringle, that has really answered all the questions we had about them.
I think the biggest thing is the step up of Wyatt Geldmacher. Wyatt Geldmacher, he was a 5-hitter last year, very good. Now he's a bona fide star. He's batting 600 this year, Robbie. He is absolutely killing it. Kinsey has been awesome this year. And I'd say Christian Closer has also been great.
Yeah, and that was the question we had, is who is going to step up in this offense beyond the first 2 or 3 guys in the lineup, and they've had a lot of guys step up and have big-time seasons. That's why that's part of the reason this team has been so successful. But Bernie, on the pitching side, again, you knew kind of what you had at the top of the rotation, but you wasn't sure how you're going to fill it out. They've had a lot of guys step up. It hasn't quite been as good as 13U Floyd in the strikeout to walk department, but they've got several guys who've put up big-time numbers. And Bernie, the headline of that has been Peter Rojek, 17 Ks to 3 walks. Bernie, kind of like we talked about with Rudy, this is a guy who's always struck out a ton of batters, but usually it was Okay, he's going to have 6 strikeouts, but it's going to be 4 walks, Right now, Bernie, not only is he striking out a ton of guys, but he's also doing it without walking anybody. How big is it for Peter Rojek to be this successful for Nickerson? And tell me about the other pitchers who've been contributing to this strong pitching staff so far.
Yeah, I was talking to actually Land Nickerson, about a week ago, actually, and we were talking about, the Nickerson pitching staff, kind of who is the ace, who is your top guys, and I said to him, I was like, isn't Rojek one of your guys? He's like, well, he hasn't really pitched a ton this year. He's wild at times. And I look at the outing this weekend, he had 0 walks in 4 innings with like 7 or 8 Ks. He was electric. But this pitching staff, if you're going just by or, 4 in age, this got to be one of the deepest pitching staffs. For an 11U team, this team has at least 5 or 6 guys you can rely on no matter what the scenario is. Wyatt Geldmacher, who's 7th innings on this team. I watched him pitch a championship game. He was electric. So this team has so many guys. Frazier, Kensey, Easton Taylor, I think it's like 1 earned run all season. Christian Closer's been the strike thrower of the team. There's just so many guys here, man. I remember my team was 11U. We had 1 pitcher that we relied on. And this team, is so far ahead of that. They already have 6 or 7 guys they can use in any given week in any spot.
And Pringle, we don't always talk about youth prep here on BB After Dark. Usually we wait till they get to 11U to really break down the guys coming up from youth prep. But I do want to give a shout out to 10U Bell, another winning weekend, 3-1, and specifically the pitching staff. They've got really started to invest in precision pitching. 3 guys, Gabe Thompson, Jack Newsom, and Hudson Pollock, all 3 pitched this weekend. Between the 3 of them, 12 Ks to just 7 walks. These guys are putting in the work, Pringle, and it's really starting to come through for them, especially on the pitching side. Give me your thoughts, Pringle, on Gabe Thompson, Jack Newsom, and Hudson Pollock really starting to round out this pitching staff. A nice weekend for all 3 of them.
I think one of the things that is the most impressive is that all 3 of those guys had over 55% strike rate, which at that age is not very easy to do, and especially Hudson Pollock had a 65% strike rate. That'll play at that age, throwing strikes, getting strikeouts. Gabe Thompson, I know, closed out 3 of the 4 games for 10U Bell. So that's very impressive there.
Yeah, big time stuff. I think he pitched in 4 games this week in Pringle. He was great in all of them. He threw strikes the entire time. He was fantastic. So very, very impressive stuff. And then Bernie, on the offensive side, we were talking about, I think 10U was missing a couple guys this weekend, had a couple guys out of town, and guys were able to step up. They were able to find guys to do damage and to really score runs. Jack Newsom hit .833 this weekend. Hudson Pollock, a guy, hit .500. He's kind of known as a pitcher, but he's putting up big offensive numbers. Bernie, this team was really able to come together and put up some offensive numbers. Give me some thoughts on the hitters of this team, Bernie, for this 10U Bell squad.
Yeah, there's a lot of great kids here, obviously. You have the Marquardt brothers who are always great. You have Isaiah Russ, you have Huddy, you have Newsham. But this team was missing a couple guys on Saturday, and then Sunday was kind of the real test of them. They were out the Marquardt brothers, who are 2 of their top hitters, 2 of their top defenders, 2 of their better arms. I know JB walked in that game with just 9 players, and 2 or 3 guys from Zazueta. And they put up a fight against the one-seeded Rowan Cyrus. It was good, man. I was there for most of that game. And a lot of guys stepped up, man. A lot of guys toward the bottom of the lineup. Applebaum, Dickerson, Thompson all weekend played third base. They had a lot of guys step up here to where I know JB's a little worried going into the weekend, but I think, he can be relaxed a little more now knowing that he has the depth that he has, that they were able to compete.
That age is really starting to come around, Bernie. I'm excited to see how their careers progress as they get older in the Bears. But it was a great weekend for Bears baseball. Big-time weekends from top to bottom. And, Bernie, it's not going to be too long now until the high school guys come back, and we'll have a lot more to talk about here on BBN After Dark. But that's going to do it for this episode. We'll talk to y'all next time.